A reporter asked Deshaun Watson directly whether he's prepared for whatever reaction might be waiting for him at the stadium this Saturday. His answer was short and blunt. He said he doesn't care, twice. I want to spend this video walking through exactly why that question needed asking in the first place, because the disconnect between this fan base and its newly named starting quarterback isn't calming down. If anything, it's escalating in ways that are becoming impossible to ignore. I think that specific exchange, brief as it was, actually tells you a lot about where things currently stand. A reporter doesn't ask a starting quarterback whether he's braced for a hostile crowd reaction unless there's genuine, credible reason to expect one. That question wouldn't have been asked in a normal week under normal circumstances. The fact that it needed asking at all, and the flatness of Watson's response to it, says something about how far this relationship between quarterback and fanbase has actually deteriorated heading into a real regular season. Let's start with something Todd Monken said that I think actually explains a lot about how this entire competition got structured in the first place. He was asked whether setting things up this way, a longer runway before Sanders potentially sees real regular season snaps, rather than throwing him straight into a road opener, might actually set him up for greater long-term success. Monken's answer was thoughtful. He said, every player develops differently, that some quarterbacks walk in and play well immediately, while others genuinely need more time, and that's true at every position on a roster. He said that early in the offseason, once Sanders started showing traits the staff genuinely liked, the wiring they wanted to see in a young quarterback, that's exactly when the decision got made, to give him more reps and to actually turn this into a real competition. He was candid that early on, Watson was clearly ahead, largely because of experience, which Monken said made complete sense given where each player was in his career. But he framed where Sanders sits today as a direct product of that investment the staff made in him, and said he's genuinely excited about the long-term trajectory here. That Sanders still has real areas to keep developing, but continues to absorb everything thrown at him like a sponge. He said he thinks it's simply a matter of time before everyone gets to see that fully translate. I want to sit with that specific phrase, sponge, for a second longer, because coaches don't typically reach for that word carelessly when describing a player they're lukewarm on. It's shorthand for a specific kind of trust, the belief that whatever you install this week actually sticks and shows up correctly the following week without needing to be retaught constantly. That's not something every young player earns from a demanding position coach. And hearing that language attached to Sanders this deep into camp tells you the belief inside that building runs deeper than the current depth chart designation might suggest on its own. There's an interesting wrinkle buried in that explanation too, one that a fellow Browns content creator flagged, and that I think is worth repeating here. According to that specific framing, this actually became a real competition because Sanders forced the issue through his own performance, not because the organization set out from day one intending to create an open competition. Read between the lines on that, and it suggests the original organizational plan may have simply been Watson as the unquestioned starter from the jump, with Sanders essentially earning his way into contention through what he put on tape, rather than being handed a fair fight from the beginning. Now let's get into what's actually happening around this fan base right now, because it's genuinely intense. I want to be upfront that Browns fans are clearly, visibly unhappy with how this decision landed. Some of that frustration comes from wanting to see Sanders get his opportunity. Some of it comes from fans who simply don't want to watch Watson under center, regardless of who the alternative is. Both of those groups have been loud since this announcement came down. The clearest physical example of that frustration showed up outside the stadium, near the Jim Brown statue. Multiple signs appeared around that statue overnight, and by the next morning, someone from the Browns organization had already come down and removed them. Local coverage captured the signs before they came down, and they referenced things like the total value of Watson's contract, pointed criticism tied to his off-field legal history, and messaging, suggesting fans feel this decision has caused lasting damage to both the team and the city's relationship with ownership. Whether or not you agree with every message on those signs, the fact that they went up at all, and that the organization moved quickly to take them down, tells you how seriously this backlash is actually being treated behind the scenes. I think the specific choice of location matters here too, and it's worth explaining why for anyone who isn't deeply familiar with Cleveland sports history. That statue represents one of the most respected figures in this franchise's entire history. Someone synonymous with excellence and integrity, both on the field and in how he carried himself off it. Choosing that exact spot to stage a public protest wasn't random. It's a deliberate statement about the gap fans feel between what this franchise used to represent and what they believe it's settling for right now at the quarterback position. That symbolism is doing a lot of work, even before you read a single word on any of the actual signs. Reporters on the ground talked directly to fans in that same area, and the sentiment was consistent. People want to see Sanders get his shot. I think this entire situation actually adds real intensity to every home game this season, specifically because of how divided this fan base has become. You've got one half of the fan base that simply isn't ready to move past everything that's happened off the field with Watson. And you've got another half that's frustrated purely on football terms, arguing he hasn't done enough on the field to justify the opportunity given how competitive this camp actually was. That's a lot of tension sitting on top of a single quarterback decision, and I don't think it's overstating things to say that if Sanders had been named the starter instead, almost none of this specific controversy would currently be happening. I think it's genuinely important to separate those two groups of frustrated fans, because they're not actually arguing the same thing, even though they've landed in the same place publicly. One group's objection is rooted entirely in football evaluation, completion percentages, turnover margins, the tape we've all broken down together throughout this camp. That's a debate you can have entirely on the merits, and reasonable people can disagree on how much weight certain preseason performances should actually carry. The other group's objection exists almost entirely outside of football evaluation altogether, and no amount of strong quarterback play from Watson this season is likely to fully resolve that particular strain of frustration. Both groups are loud right now, and both groups are contributing to the same overall tension, but they're fundamentally different conversations happening under one shared banner of discontent. Let's shift over to actual football now, because there was a final practice to break down before this preseason wraps up completely. Just a quick scheduling note first. There's no practice tomorrow as the team preps for Thursday's preseason finale against New England, and Sanders is not expected to play in that game at all. According to Todd Monken, that's specifically because the staff wants to get extended looks at Dillon Gabriel and Taylor Green in that specific matchup. Gabriel has played the fourth quarter in each preseason game so far, while Green hasn't seen the field yet this preseason. As for today's session itself, Watson was inconsistent once again, which has honestly become the pattern with him throughout this entire camp. He had some genuinely good moments mixed in, clean checkdowns, sound decision-making in a few specific spots, but he also had real overthrows sprinkled throughout the day. Working exclusively with the first-team offense as expected, he missed high on a target working down the field at one point. Sanders, meanwhile, working with the second unit, connected on a nice play-action shot and later in a 7-on-7 period, stretched the ball down the field on a throw that genuinely highlighted the difference in style between these two quarterbacks. The session closed with a nice dig route connection, Sanders finding his receiver cleanly in that final period of 7-on-7 work. I want to bring in an outside voice here too, because I think it adds real credibility to everything we've been saying about this competition all camp. A well-regarded defensive back currently playing for the Chicago Bears, someone who actually lined up against both of these Browns quarterbacks in preseason action, was asked directly for his read on this decision. He said he couldn't give a definitive tell either way, but was clear that he personally likes Sanders, and that if a competition is genuinely close, his philosophy is you always lean toward the younger player. He said Sanders has put enough on tape that, in his opinion, he probably should have gotten the nod, while being fair to point out he wasn't inside that building and didn't see everything the coaching staff actually saw. But his closing thought was that he expects Sanders to eventually take this job over at some point regardless. Coming from a defensive player who's actually had to prepare for and face both of these quarterbacks directly, that's a genuinely credible, informed opinion, not just outside speculation. I want to underline why that specific type of endorsement carries extra weight compared to a media analyst's opinion. A defensive back, preparing to actually cover a receiver and read a quarterback's eyes in real time, has to study tendencies, release points, decision-making patterns. All the details that only really reveal themselves through actual game planning rather than casual observation. When a player who's gone through that exact preparation process against both quarterbacks tells you one of them stood out more than the other, that's coming from someone with genuine professional insight into what separates a good quarterback from a merely adequate one at this level. There was also a really encouraging update about how Sanders has actually handled all of this personally. According to Brown's beat reporters, his spirit has stayed genuinely high throughout this entire process, despite not winning the job he clearly wanted. There was a moment during one long play in a recent practice where he got visibly excited, hopping up and pointing enthusiastically, even though the outcome didn't directly benefit him individually. And when Monken actually delivered the news to him about the decision, reporters who were present said he had a smile on his face the entire time. That's a pretty remarkable response for a competitive player who genuinely believed he had a real shot at winning this job outright. I think that reaction, more than almost anything else covered in this entire story, is the detail that should give this fanbase real confidence heading into whatever comes next. Competitive athletes at this level generally don't fake genuine enthusiasm for a teammate's success, especially not in a moment as personally disappointing as this one had to be. That kind of authentic response under real disappointment tends to say more about a player's long-term makeup than any single throw or any single practice rep ever could. It's exactly the kind of intangible trait that coaching staffs quietly weigh heavily when they're projecting who a young player becomes once real opportunity eventually arrives. One Browns broadcaster added some important context to that reaction too, pointing out that Sanders clearly understands the long game Monken has talked about. Historically, this franchise has cycled through an enormous number of starting quarterbacks over the years, which is an unfortunate reality of being a Browns fan. But it also means the odds genuinely favor Sanders getting real starting opportunities at some point this season, regardless of how it opened. That same reporter argued this entire competition actually benefited Sanders significantly, that he's dramatically further along than he was a year ago, and that whenever his real opportunity arrives, he'll be in a much better position to succeed than he was during whatever flashes we saw from him as a rookie. So here's where I land on all of this, heading into the regular season. I still believe Sanders is going to get his opportunity, and I don't think anyone in that building disagrees with that broader timeline either. He went from 4th on this depth chart a year ago to 1st for a real stretch of this camp, and I have no doubt he can make the jump from 2nd to 1st again whenever that moment actually arrives. My honest disappointment isn't really about the long-term outcome here. I was personally hoping for him to get a genuine full season given the expectations I have for this roster overall. This team has real pieces in place already, a strong defense, a legitimately talented backfield, and all it really needs at this point is a quarterback playing at a high level to tie everything together. Sanders is exactly that answer, in my opinion. But having to wait through this specific stretch, knowing he's ready right now, is genuinely the part that stings the most. I know his moment is coming. I just wish it wasn't going to take this particular route to get there. Whatever happens Thursday against New England, whatever happens in that regular season opener against Jacksonville, I don't think this story is going away quietly. Not with a fan base this openly divided and this openly vocal about it. This team is going to have to win Watson over just as much as Watson has to win over this fan base. And right now, both of those relationships look genuinely fragile heading into a season that this organization badly needs to go well. I'll be tracking exactly how that plays out once the games actually start counting, both in terms of what happens on the field and how this fan base actually responds once real football is on the line, instead of just training camp reps. This entire situation still has a lot of chapters left to write, and I don't think anyone, myself included, has a fully confident read yet on how it all eventually resolves. For now, all we can do is watch it unfold in real time together, the way we have all camp, and keep an honest, tape-based eye on both of these quarterbacks, regardless of who's technically holding the job on any given Sunday. Let me know down below how you're feeling about all of this heading into the regular season. Whether you're firmly in the Sanders camp, willing to give Watson a real chance, or somewhere genuinely torn in between. Based on everything happening around this fan base right now, I suspect a lot of you are still working through exactly where you land on it too.